The Mexico cartel facility had been operating for months under perfect cover. The triple-layer jungle canopy made aerial detection nearly impossible. Intelligence agencies knew something big was happening in the region, but didn't know how best to attack until the United States got involved. What happened next showcased exactly why the Warthog earned its fearsome reputation. How does one jet completely destroy a facility that big with pinpoint accuracy? And more importantly, how did this 1970 engineering solve a 21st century problem that billion-dollar stealth fighters couldn't touch? Join us as we dive deep into the heart of the sting operation and uncover the impressive features of the A-10 Warthog. The objective of the mission was to destroy the cartel drug lab in the remote terrain. This came as a result of months of intelligence gathering, informants, and satellite images. Despite all these, the dense jungle vegetation prevented adequate surveillance for the local enforcement to carry out a proper sting operation. When the United States got wind of this information, they decided the best jet for the mission was the A-10 Warthog. Miles away from any official patrol routes, the cartel drug lab was running at full capacity. All around them, the thick jungle canopy worked like nature's own camouflage net and kept the whole operation invisible from above. Nobody within the cartel had any clue what was about to happen. Then the sound of the A-10 broke through the canopy with its distinctive straight wings, the armored cockpit, and the most devastating weapon ever built, the GAU-8 Avenger. What made this strike remarkable wasn't just the precision, it was how surgically clean everything went down. The laser-guided targeting meant every single round hit exactly where it needed to. Chemical processing equipment got shredded, storage tanks erupted in flames, and packaging facilities disintegrated. But here's the thing, not one civilian got hurt in the process. The timing was perfect. For weeks, they had been meticulously tracking the cartel's movement and patterns and knew precisely when to strike to avoid hitting civilians. There were only a few workers on site when they first heard the roar of those GAU-8 rounds. They ran for their lives into the jungle before even knowing what was going on. They all thought it was either an equipment breakdown or a rival cartel hit. The possibility that this was a military aircraft didn't even cross their mind. Within minutes of the smoke clearing, local law enforcement suddenly appeared from seemingly nowhere. Turns out they had been positioned at strategic points around the perimeter, ready to move in once the shooting stopped. That's where the design of the A-10 really stands out. The reason the GAU-8 cannon is so huge is not all about its raw force. It's about how surgically powerful it is. It can stay for hours waiting for the right time to hit its mark. Those twin turbofan engines are way more fuel efficient than fighter jet power plants, so they can spend hours on reconnaissance without having to land and refuel constantly. This is possible due to the titanium armor bathtub surrounding the pilot if things go hairy in hostile territory. Even if cartel forces possessed surface-to-air missiles or heavy machine guns, the A-10 can take the hit that would ground other aircraft. The design specifications are impressive. Engineers considered the potential consequences of half the tail being blown off or one engine failing. They made it possible for such attacks not to bring down the aircraft. 1,200 pounds of titanium armor, called the bathtub by pilots, surrounds the cockpit and critical flight controls. This is no flimsy metal can. It's a real titanium armor plating, up to 3.8 centimeters thick, in areas reportedly more vulnerable to incoming fire. Everything about the armor system was developed on bullet trajectories and how shells ricochet off of angled surfaces. They knew precisely where the worst of it would be, so engineers were able to design the armor plating for those areas. Almost 6% of the aircraft's total weight is titanium. That's how much they prioritized, ensuring that pilots still remain as alive as possible. It has been tested to withstand 23mm cannon rounds and will deflect the fragments. Here is the detail that many miss. Every surface on the inside of the craft with which the pilot will come in contact is covered by multiple layers of nylon shields. This will bounce off the tiny metal fragment that splashes off the armoring when a round strikes it. Because even behind the main armor, pilots could still be wounded without those shields, so they thought about an all-round protection for them. When Captain Kim Campbell took massive damage over Baghdad, her A-10 lost an engine and the hydraulics got shredded, forcing her to fly manual controls for nearly an hour. Most aircraft would have been smoking holes in the ground, but Campbell brought hers home intact. That flight became legendary because it demonstrated the true potential of the bathtub concept, taking hits that would have severely injured any other pilot in any other aircraft, then flying for an hour on backup systems. That is not luck. That is engineering specifically designed to bring people home alive. The A-10 was designed to operate from rough forward bases and makeshift runways, where engine damage from debris is typically a significant concern. But those General Electric TF-34GE 100 turbofans sit way up high on the fuselage, which keeps them away from all the rocks and dirt that jet engines hate. Plus, this setup means ground crews can keep the engines running while they are loading weapons and fuel, a huge time saver when missions are stacking up. Those engines are heavy beasts, so they need serious support. 4 massive bolts connect each engine pylon to the airframe. Overkill by most standards, but necessary when the aircraft's designed to take battle damage and keep flying. Here is something interesting about the engine design. They have a 6-to-1 bypass ratio, which means they run cooler than typical military engines. That translates to a smaller heat signature, making the aircraft harder for infrared-seeking missiles to lock onto. The positioning helps too. Exhaust gets directed over the tailplanes, which shields the hot gases from ground-based heat-seeking missiles looking up from below. It's one of those design choices that seems weird until the reasoning becomes clear. Most military aircraft prioritize speed and maneuverability, but the A-10's engineers focused on survivability and operational flexibility. Being able to operate from damaged airfields while being harder to detect, that's the kind of thinking that keeps aircraft flying missions when everything else is grounded. The fuel system's built like a fortress within a fortress. All 4 main tanks sit clustered near the aircraft's center, completely separated from the fuselage walls. That means any projectile has to punch through the outer skin first, then travel through space before it can even reach a fuel tank's exterior. But here is where it gets really clever. Those fuel transfer lines automatically seal themselves when they get hit. If the damage is too severe for the self-sealing system to handle, check valves kick in and prevent fuel from flowing into that compromised tank. Most of the fuel system components live inside the tanks themselves, so if something breaks, it doesn't create external leaks. The whole refueling system gets purged clean after every use too. Inside each tank, there's this reticulated polyurethane foam lining both the inner and outer walls. When projectiles tear through, this foam catches debris and keeps fuel from sloshing around or spilling out everywhere. Fire protection doesn't stop there either. Heavy firewalls separate the engines from everything else, backed up by dedicated fire suppression systems. The engineers really thought through every possible failure mode. Even if catastrophic damage somehow takes out all 4 main fuel tanks, there is still a backup plan. 2 self-sealing sump tanks carry enough fuel for 230 miles of flight, not much for a cross-country trip, but plenty to get back to friendly territory or reach an emergency landing strip. At the heart of the A-10 is that vast 30 by 173 millimeter GAU 8/A Avenger autocannon. This monster is one of the most destructive aircraft weapons ever used in battle, a mechanized 7-barrel rotary cannon designed for shredding tanks and armored vehicles. Once it hits its stride, 65 to 70 rounds blast out every second after that. The precision is strong for something this powerful. From 4,000 feet altitude, 80% of shots land within a 40-foot circle. That's surgical accuracy when firing depleted uranium armor-piercing rounds at such an insane rate. The whole system works best at what's called a slant range of 4,000 feet, basically the A-10 diving down at a 30-degree angle, which happens to be the perfect attack geometry for busting tanks. Here is something wild. The entire aircraft was designed around this gun. Engineers mounted the GAU-8 slightly off to the left side, but the barrel that's firing sits on the right, keeping everything lined up with the aircraft's center line. And behind all that firepower is the 5'11" tall, theoretically 1,350 round, 30mm ammo drum. In reality, it has about 1,174 rounds, which is still enough to spoil anyone's day. The Air Force, too, wasn't risking enemy fire. They sheathed the drum in armor plates of varying thicknesses, intended to detonate incoming shells before they could strike the ammunition contained within. Most A-10s pack AGM-65 Maverick missiles as their go-to standoff weapon. These systems utilize either TV guidance or infrared targeting to hit targets far beyond cannon range, keeping pilots safely away from surface-to-air threats. During Desert Storm, crews got creative with the Maverick's infrared camera. Since the A-10 didn't have proper night vision gear back then, they basically used the missile's targeting system as a makeshift FLIR for nighttime missions. The weapon's loadout doesn't stop there. Cluster bombs, Hydra 70 rocket pods, GPS-guided munitions like the GBU-39 small-diameter bomb, pave-way laser-guided bombs, JDAMs, and basically anything that goes boom and fits on a pylon. There's also the AGM-154 joint standoff weapon for hitting targets from a serious distance. Standard defensive gear includes an ALQ-131 electronic countermeasures pod under one wing and a pair of AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles under the other. The ECM pod jams enemy radar while the Sidewinders handle any fighters that get too close for comfort. Since A-10s spend their time hugging the deck at relatively slow speeds, staying invisible matters more than looking cool. Over the years, the Air Force has tried all sorts of paint schemes. There was the peanut scheme with sand, yellow, and field drab colors. Winter ops have black and white patterns. Some aircraft sported mixed tan, green, and brown schemes. The most recognizable Cold War setup was European woodland camouflage, dark green, medium green, and dark gray, designed to blend in with typical European forests. This scheme assumed enemy fighters posed a bigger threat than ground fire, so the focus was on blending in when viewed from above. Everything changed with the Gulf War, and priorities changed. Soon the real threats were coming from the ground, rather than air-to-air combat, and the Compass Ghost scheme was born. This top is grayish-black, while the underside is light gray, the ultimate shirt for Winchester when fighting from the ground up. The 355th Tactical Training Wing at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona received the first A-10s in March 1976. Aircraft wear is a factor, however, and the 354th Tactical Fighter Wing at Myrtle Beach Air Force Base in South Carolina became the first operationally capable unit in October '77. The thing is, of course, plenty of Air Force pilots were less than thrilled about the A-10 arriving to ruin their shiny airfields. When people think of fighter jets, they immediately imagine sleek designs barreling through the skies at speeds rivaling or exceeding that of sound. And then there is the Warthog. No, it's not quick, and it isn't sleek or pretty looking, but it gets the job done. Officers who join the Air Force often dislike operating A-10s because they believe the aircraft is less sophisticated. They usually dream of flying interceptors and air superiority fighters like the F-22. So being assigned to an A-10 is seen as a step down. Things changed again in '87 when many A-10s got reassigned to forward air control duties and redesignated as OA-10s. In this role, they typically carry up to 6 pods of 2.75-inch Hydra rockets, usually loaded with smoke or white phosphorus warheads for marking targets. The OA-10 designation was basically just paperwork, though. These aircraft stayed physically identical and could still bring the pain when needed. The forward air control mission made perfect sense for the A-10. Who better to coordinate close air support than pilots flying the ultimate close air support platform? They understood the mission better than anyone. The A-10 sat out the initial invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. That changed in March 2002 when squadrons got deployed to Pakistan and Bagram Air Base for Operation Anaconda, the big push against Taliban and Al-Qaeda forces. Once they arrived, those Warthogs never really left, staying busy hunting down whatever remained of both groups. Operation Iraqi Freedom kicked off on March 20th, 2003, with 60 OA-10s and A-10s joining the opening wave. The Air Force later released some interesting numbers about that campaign. During the initial invasion phase, A-10s maintained an 85% mission-capable rate, pretty impressive for aircraft operating in harsh desert conditions while taking enemy fire. Those GAU-8 cannons got a serious workout too. Pilots burned through 311,597 rounds of 30mm ammunition during the invasion. The aircraft also flew 32 missions dropping propaganda leaflets, which seems almost quaint compared to everything else they were doing. The campaign wasn't without losses though. one A-10 got shot down near Baghdad International Airport late in the fighting. September 2007 marked a major milestone when the A-10C, with its precision engagement upgrade, reached initial operating capability. This wasn't just a minor tweak. The digital avionics and communication systems completely transformed how quickly pilots could find and engage close air support targets. The 104th Fighter Squadron from the Maryland Air National Guard took the upgraded A-10Cs to Iraq in 2007, becoming the first unit to deploy the new variant in combat. The difference was immediately obvious. Missions that used to take forever to coordinate now happened in minutes instead of hours. Unfortunately, not all A-10 stories have a silver lining. Tragedy struck on December 8, 1988, when an A-10A from United States Air Forces in Europe crashed into an apartment building at Remscheid, West Germany, fatally injuring the pilot and 6 civilians. In another incident, the aircraft slammed through the upper floors of a building. Another 50 were injured. Both of the crashed aircraft and pilots were dealing with terrible weather and spatial disorientation. The story gets a bit more complicated. The rates of cancer in that neighborhood rose precipitously over the subsequent years. That prompted some to question whether the A-10 was loaded with depleted uranium ammunition, something the United States denied at the time. Then there is the really bizarre case from April 2, 1997. Captain Craig Button was flying an A-10 from Davis-Monthan when something went seriously wrong. Instead of following his planned route, Button flew hundreds of miles off course without saying a word on the radio. He never tried to eject, and the aircraft eventually crashed. Investigators couldn't come up with any explanation except a deliberate act to intentionally crash the aircraft, which is pretty much the only thing that makes sense given how everything played out. The whole incident sparked massive speculation about what Button was thinking and where he might have been headed. It took 3 weeks before anyone found the crash site. Here is the kicker. That A-10 was carrying live bombs when it went down, and they were never recovered. Somewhere out there in the wilderness, those munitions are still sitting where Button's aircraft came to rest, a grim reminder that even the most reliable aircraft can't account for human factors. So there it is, the complete story of how one aircraft went from being the unwanted stepchild of the Air Force to becoming the most feared close support platform on the planet. The A-10 Warthog is not just some relic from the Cold War that somehow stuck around. It's proof that sometimes the best solution is not the flashiest or most expensive one. Think about it. While everyone else was chasing speed and stealth, Fairchild built something that could absorb punishment, deliver devastating firepower, and keep pilots alive in the worst possible conditions. Those titanium bathtubs, redundant systems, and that massive GAU-8 cannon weren't accidents. They were deliberate choices made by engineers who understood what close air support really meant. From those early days when fighter pilots didn't want anything to do with it, to modern operations where ground commanders specifically requested A-10 support over everything else, this aircraft earned its reputation the hard way. Desert Storm, Afghanistan, Iraq, every conflict proved the same thing. When soldiers need help and need it fast, nothing else comes close to what the Warthog delivers. Sure, there's constant talk about retirement and replacement programs. The F-35 gets thrown around as the future of everything. But here's the reality. After 50 years of service, the A-10 is still doing missions that billion-dollar stealth fighters can't touch. Whether it's surgical strikes in jungle clearings or supporting troops in urban combat, this aircraft keeps proving that good engineering beats fancy marketing every single time. The real question isn't whether the A-10 will eventually get retired. Everything does eventually. The question is whether whatever replaces it will be half as effective at the mission it was actually designed for, bringing the fight to the enemy while bringing pilots home alive. The cartel's maritime convoy has just suffered its greatest loss, watching a massive drug shipment vanish under U.S. firepower. With crackdowns intensifying, cartel leaders took their boldest gamble yet, deploying narco subs, go-fasts, and armed boats to shield their cargo. But when the fleet crossed paths with a controversial U.S. Navy task force, the outcome was swift and devastating. How did the Navy dismantle the convoy? How severe was the blow to cartel operations? Join us as we reveal the full story behind the strike that crushed the cartel at sea. In what U.S. officials are calling the largest narcotics offload in Coast Guard history, Crews in Florida on Saturday unloaded 76,140 pounds of cocaine and marijuana seized during coordinated operations across the Eastern Pacific and Caribbean. Valued at an estimated $473 million, the record-breaking haul underscores the Trump administration's escalating counter-narcotics campaign under its new initiative, Operation Pacific Viper. The massive seizure consisted of 61,740 pounds of cocaine and 14,400 pounds of marijuana intercepted during 19 separate smuggling operations. Authorities detained 34 cartel members and confirmed the removal of what they estimate as 23 million lethal doses of cocaine, an amount that could, in theory, fatally overdose the entire population of Florida. The interruptions were far from routine. Coast Guard cutters, tactical boarding teams, a helicopter squadron, and even the Navy's USS Cole joined in sweeping maritime operations involving a Royal Netherlands Navy vessel. 11 high-speed, go-fast boats were intercepted, many after grueling multi-day pursuits in open waters. Among the largest seizures were 8,800 pounds of cocaine near the Galapagos Islands in June and 9,160 pounds near Socorro Island, Mexico, in July. Officials celebrated the bust as a milestone in President Trump's wider effort to stem narcotics inflows into the United States. Homeland Security described the mission as a historic partnership, leveraging overwhelming naval and Coast Guard power in international waters, where roughly 80% of successful interdictions occur. By pushing enforcement farther offshore, the administration seeks to dismantle supply routes before they can ever reach American ports. What makes Operation Viper stand out even more is the presence of USS Cole. This Arleigh Burke-class Flight 1 Aegis-guided missile destroyer was home-ported at Naval Station Norfolk in Virginia. The ship was named in honor of Marine Sergeant Darrell S. Cole, a machine gunner taken out in action on Iwo Jima in February 1945 during World War II. Built by Ingalls Shipbuilding and delivered to the Navy on the 11th of March, 1996, it remains one of 62 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and one of 21 Flight 1 class ships that carried the original 5-inch 54 caliber gun mounts. After years of continuous service, the destroyer became the center of international attention on the 12th of October 2000, when it was attacked by Al-Qaeda terrorists in the Yemeni port of Aden. A small fiberglass boat packed with more than 1,000 pounds of explosives detonated against the ship's port side while it was refueling, tearing a 40 by 60-foot hole into the hull. 17 sailors lost their lives, 39 were wounded, and the blast caused extensive structural damage. The attack was the deadliest strike against a U.S. Navy vessel since the Iraqi missile assault on USS Stark in 1987. It revealed the lethal effectiveness of asymmetric warfare tactics and demonstrated how vulnerable even advanced warships could be in port. The crew fought flooding for 3 days before stabilizing the vessel. Divers later confirmed the keel remained intact, making eventual repairs possible. Following the attack, the wounded were evacuated to the U.S. Army's Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany before being transferred back to the United States. In June 2001, Al-Qaeda propaganda openly celebrated the strike, with Osama bin Laden himself praising it as a model for future assaults. Al-Qaeda had already attempted a similar but less publicized strike months before the Cole bombing. On the 3rd of January 2000, operatives tried to attack the U.S. Navy destroyer USS The Sullivans while it was in port at Aden as part of the Millennium attack plots. The plan was to load a small boat with explosives and detonate it alongside the warship. The attempt failed when the overloaded craft sank before reaching its target, forcing the mission to be abandoned. Planning for the later attack on Cole was revived during the Al-Qaeda summit in Kuala Lumpur between the 5th and 8th of January 2000. That meeting was attended by several operatives, including Khalid al-Mihdhar, who would later become one of the September 11th hijackers. Mihdhar traveled afterwards to San Diego, California, before leaving on the 10th of June 2000 to visit his wife in Yemen, at a house that also functioned as a communications hub for Al-Qaeda. Following the Cole bombing, Yemeni officials identified Mihdhar as one of the planners and confirmed his presence in Yemen at the time of the operation. He later returned to the United States and took part in the hijacking of American Airlines Flight 77, which crashed into the Pentagon and took the lives of 184 people. Rescue efforts on Cole began within hours of the explosion. The first naval vessel on scene was HMS Marlborough, a Royal Navy Type 23 frigate commanded by Captain Anthony Ricks. Marlborough diverted from its return voyage to the United Kingdom after a 6-month deployment in the Persian Gulf. With full medical and damage control teams aboard, the frigate immediately assisted Cole's crew. 11 of the most critically wounded sailors were evacuated by the French Air Force to a French military hospital in Djibouti, where they underwent surgery before being transferred to Germany. Additional U.S. military support quickly followed. A quick reaction force from the U.S. Air Force 363rd Expeditionary Security Forces Squadron arrived from Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia aboard C-130 aircraft. Soon after, United States Marines from the Interim Marine Corps Security Force Company in Bahrain landed by P-3 Orion, later reinforced by a fleet anti-terrorism security team platoon flown in from Norfolk, Virginia on the 13th of October. Other U.S. Navy ships rushed to the area to provide support. USS Donald Cook and USS Hawes arrived the same day to deliver logistical and repair assistance. In the days that followed, USNS Catawba, USS Camden, USS Anchorage, USS Duluth, and USS Tarawa reached Aden, bringing harbor security, damage control equipment, replacement crews, billeting, and food services for the surviving sailors. USS Cole was hauled across the sea and arrived in Pascagoula, Mississippi, on the 13th December 2000, where the long process of rebuilding began. The investigation that followed was carried out under extremely hostile conditions. FBI and NCIS agents deployed to Yemen faced an environment where every movement carried danger. At the airport, they were met by Yemeni special forces, each soldier with an AK-47 pointed in their direction. In the evenings, speakers in Yemen's parliament called for jihad against America, their words broadcast on local television. When the agents requested surveillance footage, Yemeni authorities eventually produced a video, but the crucial moment of the explosion had been deleted. The agents lived under constant threat. They often slept in their clothes with weapons at their sides. At one point, their hotel was surrounded by armed men in traditional dress, some mounted in jeeps, forcing the agents to abandon the building for the safety of a U.S. Navy vessel anchored in the Bay of Aden. Even then, security remained uncertain. When finally cleared to fly back to shore, their helicopter flew evasive maneuvers to avoid the threat of shoulder-launched missiles. By May 2008, all those convicted for their roles in the Cole bombing had either escaped custody or been released by Yemeni officials. On the 30th of June 2008, U.S. military officials announced formal charges against Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri, who had been held at Guantanamo Bay since 2008. Accused of organizing and directing the bombing, he faced a military tribunal and the prospect of capital punishment. He was one of 3 high-value detainees acknowledged by the U.S. government as having been subjected to waterboarding and other enhanced interrogation techniques during detention. Abu Ali al-Harathi was also identified as a key figure behind the attack. He became one of the first suspected terrorists to be targeted and killed by a missile-armed Predator drone. In 2003, the U.S. Justice Department indicted Jamal Ahmad Mohammed al-Badawi and Fahd al-Qusso, described as the last major conspirator still at large. Al-Badawi was convicted in Yemen and sentenced to capital punishment, but later escaped from prison in 2006 through a tunnel with 16 other inmates. He was ultimately taken out in a U.S. drone strike in January 2019 in Yemen's Marib Governorate. Fahd al-Qusso evaded capture for years until he was taken out by a U.S. drone strike in May 2012. Tawfiq bin Attash, captured in Pakistan in 2003 and held at Guantanamo Bay, has also been described as a mastermind of the bombing. Another co-conspirator, Abdul Mun'im Salim al-Fatahani, was confirmed killed in a U.S. drone strike in January 2012. Reports from the Yemeni government in May 2012 confirmed that Fahd al-Qusso was eliminated in a southern Yemen airstrike, later verified by both U.S. officials and al-Qaeda's own media wing, As-Sahab. The aftermath of the bombing raised critical questions about the rules of engagement that had governed Cole's security. Pentagon-approved procedures forbade guards from firing on small boats unless ordered by the captain or a senior officer. The suicide craft was not identified as hostile until it was too late, leaving sentries powerless to act. Accounts from surviving sailors described the immediate aftermath. Petty Officer John Washak recalled being ordered to turn his M60 machine gun away from a second approaching boat, even as he stood wounded and covered in blood. The order was a reminder that firing without being fired upon could have led to court-martial. Petty Officer Jennifer Kudrick later reflected that, had the sentries opened fire, they might have faced punishment for taking out 2 foreign nationals rather than recognition for preventing the deaths of 17 American sailors. Years after the attack, responsibility for the USS Cole bombing was formally addressed in U.S. courts. On 14 March 2007, a federal judge ruled that the government of Sudan was liable, citing substantial evidence that Sudanese officials had aided al-Qaeda's operations. In July of that year, the same court ordered Sudan to pay $8 million to the families of the 17 sailors who lost their lives, though Sudan's justice minister declared that the ruling would be appealed. In 2009, U.S. federal judge Kimba Wood released $13.4 million in frozen Sudanese assets to be awarded to 33 spouses, parents, and children of the sailors who lost their lives in the bombing. The compensation was granted under the 2002 Terrorism Risk Insurance Act and pursued through the efforts of Miami attorney Andrew C. Hall. The ruling reaffirmed Sudan's culpability in facilitating the attack. Another lawsuit was filed in 2010 in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia by 15 Cole sailors and 3 spouses, seeking damages for Sudan's role in supporting the terrorists who struck the destroyer. When the Sudanese government failed to respond, the court issued a default judgment in 2012, awarding the plaintiffs more than $314 million. On the 13th of February, 2020, the government of Sudan announced that it had reached an agreement to compensate the families of the USS Cole victims, a prerequisite for its removal from the state sponsors of terrorism list. Sudan reiterated that it did not accept responsibility for the bombing, but sought to normalize relations with the United States and other nations, while addressing claims tied to its former regime. In October 2020, a bilateral claims agreement was signed under which Sudan committed to pay $335 million in compensation, covering the victims of both the USS Cole bombing and the 1998 embassy bombings in Tanzania and Kenya. 2 years after the attack, USS Cole was once again underway, resuming full operations. In August 2003, the destroyer sailed with the Argentine warship Sarandí for joint drills. Cole's visit board search and seizure teams trained alongside their counterparts, conducting intensive maritime interdiction operations. The following day, the ship fired its close-in weapon system and 5-inch rounds in a live-fire exercise before exchanging officers with Sarandí by helicopter. Soon after, the destroyer Gonzales joined, and together the 3 ships rehearsed coordinated boardings. In February 2008, the destroyer was sent off Lebanon's coast, followed by further deployments. In February 2017, after Iranian-backed Houthi rebels attacked a Saudi warship in the Gulf of Aden, Cole was ordered to the region. Both Iran and the Houthis denied working together, but the symbolism of Cole's presence was unmistakable. In May 2024, Cole deployed once again amid escalating Middle East tensions following the Hamas attack on Israel. Operating from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, the destroyer formed part of a strike force. Then in October 2024, the ship made headlines again. During Iranian missile strikes against Israel, Cole intercepted incoming weapons using SM-3 and SM-6 missiles, decisive proof of her enduring role at the front line of U.S. naval power. Unlucky for the cartels and those backing them, the USS Cole is not the only force now in play. A sudden and heavy buildup of U.S. naval power in the Southern Caribbean has sparked serious questions in Caracas and across Washington about whether this deployment is truly about combating drug cartels, as the Trump administration insists, or if there is another objective beneath the surface. 7 U.S. warships, reinforced by a nuclear-powered fast-attack submarine, are either already in the region or expected to arrive soon. Together, they bring more than 4,500 sailors and Marines, a formidable show of force in waters that usually see far smaller deployments. President Donald Trump has declared that fighting cartels is a central mission for his administration, and U.S. officials claim the operation is designed to dismantle trafficking networks and foreign criminal groups. Stephen Miller, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, went further, describing the buildup as a direct strike against drug cartels and foreign terrorist organizations operating in the hemisphere. Yet the true effect of this presence remains uncertain. Most maritime drug routes into the United States run through the Pacific, not the Atlantic, where these ships now patrol. And much of the Caribbean trade enters by clandestine flights, not sea lanes. The scale of the deployment makes clear that this is more than routine patrol duty. Among the vessels are the USS San Antonio, the USS Iwo Jima, the USS New York, and the USS Fort Lauderdale. Each is engineered for combat durability, operational versatility, and long-term offensive power. The USS Iwo Jima, a landing helicopter dock, serves as a floating command center for Marines and aircraft alike. It can launch helicopters, MV-22 Osprey tiltrotors, and amphibious assault vehicles. Defensive systems, from the rolling airframe missile to the Phalanx close-in weapon system, shield the vessel against incoming missiles, hostile aircraft, and surface threats, ensuring constant readiness in contested waters. The USS San Antonio and USS New York, both amphibious transport docks, are stealth-enhanced platforms built to carry thousands of Marines, vehicles, and equipment directly to shore. Their over-the-horizon amphibious capability relies on landing craft, helicopters, and tiltrotors, enabling sudden strikes beyond visible range. Reinforced hulls and command networks ensure resilience and survival under fire, turning the group into a mobile base of sustained combat power. Alongside them, the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit deploys with unmatched adaptability. With approximately 2,200 Marines, the unit is trained in amphibious assaults, urban warfare, reconnaissance, and specialized missions. It fields armored vehicles, artillery, and air assets, including AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters, AV-8B Harrier jets, and MV-22 Ospreys, combining firepower with speed for decisive land and coastal strikes. The strength of this force lies in its integration. Secure, real-time networks link ships, aircraft, and Marines on the ground, enabling fast intelligence sharing, coordinated targeting, and synchronized action. This connectivity allows the group to switch seamlessly between amphibious combat, maritime security, humanitarian response, or precision special operations, projecting deterrent and offensive power across the globe within days. Reinforcing the message, on August 29, 2025, a Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser was photographed docking at Panama's naval base near the entrance to the Panama Canal. The skies above the Caribbean are now dominated by American surveillance. P-8 Poseidon aircraft, specialized naval patrol planes derived from the Boeing 737 platform, conduct persistent flights over international waters, collecting intelligence with surgical precision. Unlike their civilian counterparts, these aircraft are engineered for combat endurance and maneuverability. Reinforced fuselages, redesigned nacelles, stronger wings, and advanced anti-icing systems allow them to operate at lower altitudes and perform aggressive turns beyond the capacity of standard passenger jets. Each Poseidon carries a powerful suite of sensors, radars, and electronic warfare systems. The Raytheon APY-10 multi-mission radar can detect submarines, ships, and low-flying aircraft across vast distances. Inside the cabin, 5 crew stations line the port side, manned by naval flight officers and enlisted warfare operators who fuse radar, sonar, and electronic intelligence streams into a single operational picture. Unlike older P-3 Orions, the Poseidon sacrifices the magnetic anomaly detector in most versions, relying instead on advanced signal processing and, when necessary, pairing with unmanned MQ-4C Triton drones for continuous coverage. Weapons capability matches its surveillance role. A small bomb bay behind the wing can deploy torpedoes, depth charges, or specialized stores. With a high-altitude anti-submarine warfare weapon capability, even standard torpedoes can be dropped from 30,000 feet, turning them into precision glide weapons. The Poseidon's design also includes 6 auxiliary fuel tanks and the ability to refuel mid-flight via Air Force KC-13-5, KC-10, or KC-46 tankers, extending its range for days-long operations. The significance of their presence is not lost on observers. Officially, Washington maintains the operation is directed at cartel networks. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has positioned himself at U.S. Southern Command in Florida, reinforcing the administration's claim of direct oversight. Yet regional analysts remain unconvinced. They argue the deployment reflects classic pressure tactics against Nicolas Maduro's government in Venezuela. For David Smilda, the message is unmistakable, a calculated display of power, the kind of maritime coercion once described simply as gunboat diplomacy. At midnight, FA-18 Super Hornets launch from a carrier and strike a hardened Venezuelan cartel lab hidden in the hills. Precision sensors pick fleeing men, lasers paint targets, and BLU-109 bunker busters collapse the tunnels in seconds. A hideout is erased, a command node shattered, and a blunt message sent across the region. This is modern naval air power, fast, surgical, and utterly unforgiving. On August 15th, the president ordered 3 Aegis-equipped Arleigh Burke-class destroyers to steam into the southern Caribbean near Venezuela. Gravely, USS Jason Dunham, and USS Samson. The move was described by U.S. officials as part of a push to pressure transnational criminal groups Washington has labeled threats to U.S. security and to disrupt sea routes used to move fentanyl and other drugs. USS Gravely is a Flight II Arleigh Burke destroyer built for multi-mission work. Gravely uses the Aegis Combat System, a linked set of radars and computers that track air and surface contacts and guide defensive missiles. The ship has a Mark 41 vertical launch system able to fire standard surface-to-air missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and ASROC anti-submarine rockets. It can operate 2 MH-60 helicopters from its hangar and flight deck, extending the ship's search and response reach well beyond the hull. Gravely's propulsion package, gas turbines driving 2 shafts, gives it the speed and endurance to sustain long patrols. The ship carries a crew trained in air defense, anti-submarine warfare, and boarding operations, so it can shift quickly from surveillance to action when intelligence or rules of engagement allow. Gravely's name honors Vice Admiral Samuel L. Gravely Jr., a historic figure in the U.S. Navy. The ship carries that legacy in its patches and in the way sailors talk about duty and first. That symbolic weight matters on long deployments. Names and history are part of what keeps a crew focused when watches are long and the sea is empty. Operationally, Gravely will likely be used as a high-end sensor and missile node, monitoring aircraft and surface traffic, protecting other ships in the group, and providing missile response if a high-value threat is identified. USS Jason Dunham brings similar weapons and a few public notes about recent operations. Like other Flight IIA Arleigh Burkes, Jason Dunham has the Aegis system, VLS cells that can fire Tomahawk, Standard, and ASROC rockets, and a hangar for MH-60 helicopters. The ship is roughly 509 feet long and built to sustain long deployments, participate in carrier strike groups, and conduct independent patrols. Public Navy releases show Jason Dunham has returned from extended deployments and worked with carrier groups and allied navies, which speaks to its training and interoperability with other U.S. and partner assets. In an anti-smuggling role, Jason Dunham's helicopters and embarked visit-board search-seizure teams give it the tools to find, approach, and inspect suspicious small craft at sea. USS Samson is a proven multi-mission destroyer with a history of deployments across the Pacific and allied exercises. Samson's features include the Mark 41 VLS, a 5-inch gun for surface engagements, torpedo tubes for anti-submarine warfare, and advanced radar and sonar suites for detecting submarines and low-flying threats. Samson has participated in humanitarian responses, multinational exercises, and long deployments, showing the class's flexibility. For the current patrols off Venezuela, Samson can perform the same layered tasks as the other 2 ships: long-range detection, helicopter sorties for scouting and interdiction, close-in naval gunfire if directed, and anti-submarine searches where intelligence suggests subs or narco-subs might be present. Taken together, these 3 destroyers create overlapping capabilities. Aegis radars on one ship share tracks with the others. Helicopters from many of the ships fly to investigate contacts, and boarding teams move from ship to small boats for inspections. The combination of long-range missiles, anti-submarine weapons, and aviation gives commanders options. Deter suspicious movement with presence, intercept and board small craft, or use missiles if ordered under strict rules of engagement. On board each destroyer, watches and drills replace headlines. Sailors monitor radar and sonar screens, check engine rooms, and run aviation operations. Helicopter crews plan flight lines to sweep shipping lanes for low, fast boats or suspicious loads. Boarding teams rehearse night approaches and searches so they can move quickly and safely when ordered to stop and inspect a vessel. The ship's legal and intelligence officers review evidence and liaise with regional partners so any interdiction fits international law and the mission's rules. Those routines are low drama but high stakes. The ships must avoid incidents that would widen a political clash while still pursuing smugglers who change tactics fast. The Venezuelan government framed the deployment as a violation of sovereignty and mere threats. They must have forgotten a recent encounter when 12 FA-18 Super Hornets slid off the carrier deck into a Black Sea sky. They left in silence, a tight arrow of metal and fuel, each jet carrying the weight of a single clear order. Take away the enemy's safe place. The target lay deep in the Golis Mountains, a cave network cut into stone and sealed with concrete. Inside, planners believed, a militant cell had set up a hardened base and stored weapons for future attacks. The choice of the Super Hornet was careful, not flashy. The F-35 brings stealth and sensors. Tomahawks fly far without a pilot, but the mission needed jets that could carry big, heavy weapons, stay in the air long enough to find their marks, and adjust in flight if things change. Each Super Hornet could bear up to 17,750 pounds of external stores. That room for weight meant the pilots could load bunker busters and guidance gear and still have fuel and sensors to spare. The airplanes were the muscle and the brain at once. On the carrier, the deck crew moved like a single machine. The flight deck was a blur of lights and shouted calls, but that noise stopped the moment the jets pushed into the night. Pilots ran final checks, tuned radios to a silent frequency, and locked weapon systems to the mission profile. They would keep strict radio silence now. Surprise was the real armor. The BLU-109 was the centerpiece. This is not a bomb that makes a big surface blast and a lot of smoke. It is a tool built to burrow. A hardened steel case drives it through concrete and packed earth. Inside is a 535-pound explosive heart, and a programmable fuse sets how long the bomb waits before it goes off. The math matters. Penetrate, pause, detonate, collapse from within. The designers meant it to break through up to 8 feet of reinforced concrete or a couple of 100 feet of dense ground, enough to reach the bones of a bunker and make them fail. The plan split the squadron into 4 groups. Each pair of jets took an entrance to the cave system. Ground spotters had painted tiny points of light with lasers, invisible to all but the bombs and the pilots who trusted them. Flying low to stay under the radar, the Hornets kept tight formation until the last moment. Then, at about 4,200 feet, the first 2 rolled in together and dove. From inside the cockpit, it was all speed and focus. The ground rose fast. The HUD glowed green numbers and markers. Pilots watched their flight path, the bomb's seeker locks, and the laser paint that told the warhead where to aim. Release points arrived on a wire of data and training. The bombs left the wings and began the silent arc into the mountain. There were no fireworks to announce the strike. From the air, you might have thought the missiles disappeared into stone. Then, not minutes later, but seconds, the mountain answered. Deep detonations sent internal pressure waves through dark tunnels. Stored munitions inside the caves ignited and added their fury to the first blast. The effect was not a surface crater, but an internal shudder and collapse. Supports snapped, corridors fell in, the safe rooms filled with rubble. This was the point. Conventional bombs conceal an entrance. They can leave a mouth that looks closed, but caves can hide and survive. The BLU-109 struck where the enemy thought they were safest, inside. When the chambers went, the mountain itself became a gravestone for the base. Back on the carrier, mission planners watched feeds and read sensors. Heat signatures, seismic blips, and secondary explosions streamed across screens. The first wave climbed away and formed up. Some crews swung back to check for remaining targets. Others circled to watch for movement. The plan always left room for a second phase, follow-up strikes to finish what the first pass had started, or to hit emergent threats that showed themselves once the dust settled. What the strike did best was deny sanctuary. The cave network had been a place to hide, store, and plan. After the blast, the pathways that let militants move and resupply were gone or too dangerous to use. The mission did not seek only bodies, it aimed to remove the place itself as an option. The war in the dark is a war of rooms and routes. Take the rooms away, and the routes collapse. Precision mattered at every step. The BLU-109 needed a precise hit to reach the pocket of space it would destroy. Lasers from ground teams, special operators who risked being close enough to paint targets, had to be steady and true. Pilots had to time their dives perfectly. The bomb's programmable fuses had to count their fractions of seconds and detonate at the depth that would cause the most structural failure. One mistimed moment, one misread guide beam, could mean the difference between collapse and a wasted strike. When the first wave climbed to safer air, they watched the results. Secondary fires flared and then died. Smoke climbed in thin columns. The mountain's face bore new cracks and scars, but that was not the real measure. The caves, the chambers, the storage pits, they were no longer serviceable. Men who had planned on hiding there would find no practical shelter. Tools and weapons could be buried or destroyed. Plans could be erased. The strike showed another lesson. A small number of aircraft, with the right weapons and accurate intelligence, can do the work that once needed entire campaigns. Years ago, hitting a mountain hideout might have required days of bombing, long runs of ordnance, or a ground assault that risked many lives. Here, a dozen jets in one synchronized hour reached deep, struck hard, and left the terrain unusable. That precision reduces collateral damage and concentrates force where it counts. The operation did not end with the explosions. After the smoke thinned, teams moved in to assess. Sensors told them the major chambers had collapsed. If any militants had survived, escape routes would be narrow and tracked. If any weapons or intelligence caches remained partially intact, follow-up teams would find what the strikes had exposed. The strike's success was both physical and informational. The blast removed shelter, and it revealed what the enemy had hidden. Still, the battlefield kept speaking. Secondary explosions had thrown debris and caused local shifts in the mountain. The aftershocks mattered. The planning staff knew that war has quiet echoes. Caves that seemed dead might hide small pockets where survivors cling to life. Slow, methodical searches would follow, but the initial goal, deny the enemy a safe base, had been achieved. This sort of strike is not about spectacle. They broke the action into a single pulse. Find, fix, strike, and finish. All inside 5 minutes. It began with a flicker on a screen and ended with a chain of command that no longer worked. The AN/ASQ-228, Advanced Targeting FLIR under one Super Hornet, did the seeing. It turned dark rock and shadow into bright shapes and moving heat. It picked out 12 fighters trying to slip through a narrow crevice where no human eye could reach. In a moment, those men were no longer hidden. They were targets. The sensor did more than show heat. Its software separated weapon profiles from bodies, traced motion through brush, and fed exact coordinates into the jet systems. The laser designator on the pod painted tiny invisible dots on each figure. Weapons officers in the backseater and crews on other jets watched those dots appear on their screens. The network stitched those feeds together. One jet could track, another could confirm, and a third could release a bomb, all without a single person on the ground calling the shot. When the command came, the pilots did not chatter. They flew in tight rhythm, eyes on the instruments. The Super Hornet carried both the sensor and the weapons needed to make the strike count. They did not drop dumb bombs. They mapped each target with laser precision and timed each delivery so the blast hit at a depth calculated to collapse the caves from the inside. The BLU-109s were the right tool for that job. Heavy, hard-cased, built to dig through concrete and packed earth and then detonate where it hurt most. What made the kill chain fast was the way the systems linked together. Data moved as if there were no distance between aircraft. Target tracks updated in real time. The weapons crews saw the same picture that the sensor saw. Identification, Targeting and firing happened as a single flow. That flow closed the gap between detection and destruction. By the time the enemy realized they were exposed, there was no time to run. The strike hit near simultaneously across the crevice. The bombs went in, and the mountain spoke from inside. There were no showy crashes on the face of the cliff. The effect was internal. Tunnels bowed and supports failed. Pressure waves rolled through chambers and ignited ammo the fighters had stockpiled. Pieces of the network collapsed into powder and wreckage. Men who had planned an escape found their exits blocked by fallen stone. The result was immediate and strategic. The enemy's chain of command fractured as leaders and messengers were cut off, buried, or scattered. Orders stopped flowing. Units that had depended on a central base found themselves isolated and blind. The operation did more than destroy fighters. It broke the system they used to coordinate attacks. In war, ruining a single node can create ripple effects that spread faster than any reinforcements. This outcome was not an accident. It came from rehearsal, training, and a shared doctrine. Sensors and shooters must think as one. Pilots trained for common movements. Weapons officers learned to read the images the same way. Mission planners rehearsed the handoffs until the most complex actions felt like muscle memory. With that discipline, the whole machine could move as one thought, shaving minutes off a process that used to take hours or days. Technology made that thought possible, but people made it real. Pilots watched the images and verified what the system suggested. Weapons officers ran the math and set fuses to the exact millisecond. The carrier strike group's command staff stayed 2 steps ahead, ready to shift targets, order a second pass, or abort if civilians appeared. Each role mattered. A single mistake could waste a strike, or worse, carry consequences for innocent people. That margin for error forced calm and precision at every level. The system also changed how commanders judge risk. With a standoff sensor like the AN/ASQ-228, jets could stay well beyond the reach of most shoulder-fired threats. That distance let them run longer, watch harder, and fire from positions that kept pilots out of immediate danger. Yet safety did not mean sloppiness. The reliance on sensors required perfect discipline on the ground teams who lasered targets, and ruthless care from pilots who had to trust the data. What happened next showed the flexibility that made the strike decisive. Heat signatures revealed movement in a side tunnel. Rather than head back to the carrier and wait for a new plan, some Super Hornets called for fuel. Mid-air refueling kept them on station. They topped off from tankers, synced with the rest of the group, and executed a second targeted strike minutes after the first. The ability to refuel and re-engage without returning to base turned a single raid into a sustained pressure campaign in real time. That loop, detect, strike, refuel, strike again, kept the enemy from reforming. Where once a force might withdraw, regroup, and reappear a day later, these fighters could unspool the enemy's options in hours. The faster tempo let Allied commanders protect future forces by removing imminent threats before they could move or call for backup. Beyond the bombs and the sensors, the strike was a study in timing. Laser designators needed steady hands. Fuses needed correct programming. The AN/ASQ-228's resolution was critical. It did not simply say, "There's someone there." It showed posture, weight, and movement. That detail converted probable threats into confirmed targets. It lowered the fog of war, making decisions clearer and the use of force more surgical. There was also a moral element. The system's precision reduced the need to send in ground teams into ambushes. It cut the number of people who would have to walk into a trap to confirm the enemy's presence. Saving those lives was part of the calculus. In this strike, the technology protected both attacking crews and special forces, who might otherwise have to do the dangerous close work. After the bursts of fire, teams sifted through the data, sensors replayed the event frame by frame, analysts parsed signatures to determine what had been destroyed and what might still be salvageable. Seismic sensors and infrared scans told planners where chambers had collapsed and where heat still pulsed. This after-action feed fed prosecution, intelligence, and future planning. The strike was not an end. It was a source of fresh, usable information. The effect on the enemy was simple: no safe place. They could not rely on caves, bunkers, or buried depots if a sensor from the sky could find a narrow crevice and seed it for collapse. The loss of sanctuary forced them into movement or dispersion, both of which made them easier to track through communications and funds. The psychological shock of seeing a base erased in minutes also spread doubt among survivors, undermining morale and loyalty. The message behind the raid is simple and loud. A carrier and its fighters can reach anywhere, at any time, without asking for permission or waiting for a local base. That mobility changes the map. Where mountains and deserts once felt safe, they now face a sky that sees and a sea that moves. A carrier strike group is no longer only a show of force. It is a strike force, mobile, fast, and able to act alone if needed. In the mountains, removing a leader and his inner circle does more than kill or capture people. It breaks networks. Orders stop moving. Plans collapse. When a command node vanishes, the rest of the group splinters into confusion and fear. That ripple effect protects troops who might move in later. It also buys time for diplomats and law enforcement to act. The mission becomes more than a single hit. It becomes a way to reshape how an enemy fights. The tools that make that possible are not magical. They are aircraft, sensors, weapons, and sailors and pilots who know how to use them together. The AN/ASQ-228F LIR pod turns night into a clear picture. It sees heat and movement through smoke, dust, and brush. It tells you in plain lines where a person stands, who carries a weapon, and which path someone is using to flee. That picture lets pilots mark targets and commanders decide in seconds. Flight deck crews and pilots call the Super Hornet the Rhino because it grew into the role. Bigger, tougher, and more lethal than its predecessors. It is not just a jet for dogfights, it is a flying toolbox. It can carry heavy bombs like the BLU-109 and still have range and agility. It can patrol for hours and then dive for a target the same night. That blend of power and endurance matters when targets hide under rocks and behind trees. Those twin Pratt & Whitney engines give the Rhino thrust. They push the jet fast enough to cross miles of air and to escape danger. The shape of the jet, swept wings and leading-edge extensions, keeps it nimble when a pilot needs to turn tight or dodge threats. But raw speed and maneuverability are only half the story. The Hornet's real strength is its systems. Radar, targeting pods, and onboard computers that stitch all the battlefield data into one picture. A strike like the mountain raid is a chain. The sensor sees. The pilot confirms. The weapons officer programs the fuse. The bomb drops. The mountain falls. Each link must work, and each person must trust the other. The AN/ASQ-228 gives the first link the edge. It finds people where no one thought to look. From tens of miles away, it points like a finger. The Hornet closes, keeps quiet, and delivers the punch that ends the group's ability to use that place again. Carriers make that process repeatable. A carrier at sea carries not just jets, but tankers, sensors, and crews for days, weeks, or months. If a strike reveals new targets, jets refuel and go again. If the job needs more firepower, the carrier can launch more sorties. That ability to refuel and re-engage keeps pressure on any force that thought running into the hills would save them. This kind of power changes how wars start and how they end. In the past, hitting a fortress might have required a long planning cycle, local permission, and a ground force to clear the wreckage. Now, a carrier can act on its own intelligence and strike within hours. That speed closes the door on escape. It also reduces the need for massed forces on the ground, lowering the risk for soldiers who would have to clear a hardened site by hand. But speed and reach do not mean rough tactics. Precision is the aim. The BLU-109 is a tool designed to break what hides under the earth and concrete. It does not leave a wide blast zone. It goes in deep and detonates, where it will collapse internal chambers. That limits surface damage and focuses destruction where it matters. Combined with the targeting pod's ability to single out people in movement, the result is a strike that ends a base without flattening an entire mountain or village. There is also a legal and political edge to naval air power. Acting from the sea avoids the need for host nation bases. That can matter in places where local politics are fragile or where asking permission would slow action to the point of uselessness. A carrier off the coast holds options. to act, to wait, or to withdraw, all while staying technically independent. For commanders, that freedom is valuable. It lets them respond to threats fast without becoming entangled in local disputes. Technology also speeds the decision loop. Real-time data flows up from the pod to the jet to the carrier and to command centers ashore. That flow means a new picture can create a new plan in minutes. A fleeing group spotted in a crevice can be marked, struck and finished before it finds another hiding place. The tempo of war increases, the enemy's window to adapt shrinks. Finally, there is the human side. Sailors on a carrier, pilots in cockpits, and ground crews on the deck all accept risk to keep the system running. They also know their actions have consequences beyond the immediate blast. Taking out a mountain base can save future lives, of soldiers, of civilians, of aid workers. But it can also harden attitudes and push fighters to new tactics. That is why follow-through matters. Arrests, prosecutions, and efforts to cut off finances and safe havens after a strike keep the pressure firm and fair. For years, Mexico's war against powerful drug cartels has tested the limits of law enforcement and military strategy. But as cartel groups grow smarter, using drones, armored vehicles, and even homemade submarines, the fight has taken an unexpected turn. Now, whispers of U.S. military involvement have stirred global attention. Could America's most advanced naval aircraft carrier actually be used in this battle? And what would it mean if the skies over Mexico became a new kind of war zone? Join us as we uncover how the U.S. Navy's genius air strategies could reshape the war against Mexico's cartels. When Claudia Sheinbaum became Mexico's first female president on October 1st last year, her toughest challenge was far from politics. Just months before her inauguration, reports surfaced that major Mexican cartels were showing off advanced weapons, including the American-made FGM-148 Javelin missile launcher, a system powerful enough to destroy tanks or bring down helicopters. 2 Javelins were reportedly seized from a cartel, and a recent helicopter crash that killed a security chief may not have been an accident. A former Mexican mercenary claims the crash was caused by a Javelin strike, and forensic experts say the weapon fragments recovered match that missile's signature. Armed with heat-seeking launchers, miniguns, and landmines, over 2,800 of which have been found since 2018, the cartels now resemble well-equipped militias rather than street gangs. For almost 20 years, Mexico has been locked in a brutal war with powerful drug cartels. Despite heavy crackdowns and military raids, the violence only evolved. Streets have turned into battlegrounds where law enforcers and civilians are caught in the crossfire and have also become targets. Since the government declared war on the cartels in 2006, more than 460,000 people have lost their lives. The cartels are deliberately flaunting their firepower to send a message to President Claudia. They're ready to fight anyone who challenges their power. With the U.S. lawmakers already calling for military intervention across the border, this move could spark an even bloodier conflict. The United States has long been involved in Mexico's fight, seeing it as part of its own war on drugs. Washington has spent billions helping Mexico strengthen its police and military forces, update its justice system, and invest in projects meant to reduce illegal migration and joblessness, which was the root of the crisis. On the border, U.S. agents are always working around the clock to block the flow of drugs streaming north. Now, with violence surging once again, President Claudia Sheinbaum faces a harsh reality, and that is, Mexico's war has become a fight not just for territory, but for survival itself. As the chaos deepens, attention naturally shifts north of the border. Many wonder how far the United States might go to contain the violence threatening to spill across. Washington has the tools and the experience to strike hard and fast. Yet the question isn't about capability anymore, but consequence. The U.S. military has shown it can carry out dramatic strikes far from home. Recent operations against groups in the Middle East prove that high-tech air power can reach deep into enemy territory and reshape a fight quickly. But copying those moves in Mexico would be dangerous for reasons that matter to planners and troops alike. Distance and politics all change the rules. Attacks on facilities thousands of miles away let the U.S. act where the local state is weak or absent. When a country has little control, a short, sharp strike can remove a threat without dragging in local politics. In Mexico, that model breaks down. The two countries share a long, populated border, and Mexico is a functioning state. Military action there risks pulling the Mexican government and its people into an open conflict on their soil. One key danger is blowback. Foreign strikes sometimes trigger limited revenge or bargaining by the target, calculated to avoid wide war. But cartel networks are different. They are criminal businesses with many armed cells, local influence, and a deep grip on communities. Kill or capture one leader, and others scramble to fill the gap. That scramble often sparks internal wars, bloody reprisals, and new crime tactics. Planners cannot predict how cartel bosses, lieutenants, or rival groups will react once pressure rises. Scale matters too. In past Mideast operations, the target and objective were clear: stop missile launches, slow a nuclear program, or protect shipping. Some of those goals could be tied to a single well-planned strike or a limited campaign. Against cartels, targets are diffuse: labs, airstrips, cash flows, and hidden networks spread across towns and terrain. Destroy enough of that network, and you risk creating a long-term security vacuum where smaller gangs flourish and violence spikes. There is also the question of proximity and consequence. A 2,000-mile common border is not a buffer. Violence in northern Mexico spills into U.S. towns, trade routes, and migrant flows. Heavy-handed operations on Mexican soil could make large parts of the border zone hard to govern, repeating the chaos seen during past crackdowns. That chaos included assassinations, mass killings, and a rise in homicides, outcomes that don't serve either capital. Domestic politics and public opinion feel the sting too. Open U.S. military action in Mexico would divide opinion at home, fuel protests, and strain relations with an ally. It could also draw in hostile outside actors who see an opportunity to distract the United States and expand their own reach by supporting or exploiting the violence. Smart response needs planning beyond a single missile shot. Military planners must map likely cartel countermoves, protect civilians, and prepare for messy, follow-on effects. That means combining law enforcement, targeted strikes if ever needed, intelligence work, and support for the Mexican state, not a unilateral invasion. A strategy should aim to keep Mexican institutions intact while degrading criminal power without opening a new front of violence. This evolving battlefield demands more than ground tactics. It calls for innovation in every domain. As cartels expand their reach and weapon sophistication, the lines between crime and combat blur faster than ever. The threat now extends beyond checkpoints and safe houses, pushing the conflict into a new dimension, one that involves sophisticated military technology like the USS Gerald R. Ford. The Pentagon sent shockwaves through the defense world when it announced that the United States would deploy its most advanced aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, to the Caribbean. The move marked a major escalation in the Trump administration's campaign against Latin American drug cartels, a deviation from targeting boats at sea to preparing for possible strikes on land. The Gerald R. Ford is the crown jewel of the U.S. Navy, a floating fortress carrying stealth fighters, advanced radar, and a full complement of support ships. As the carrier wrapped up its Mediterranean deployment, it was redirected toward the coast of Venezuela. Defense officials said the goal was simple: to increase America's reach and firepower in one of the world's busiest drug trafficking corridors. The carrier strike group isn't just a show of strength. It brings dozens of F-35 fighter jets capable of stealth attacks and precision strikes. These aircraft could neutralize enemy radar and air defense systems in Venezuela, clearing the path for U.S. Special Operations Forces or drones to move in and hit ground targets. The F-35 Lightning II isn't an average fighter jet. It's more like a flying computer built for future wars. Designed to slip past radar, outsmart enemy defenses, and strike deep behind enemy lines, it's meant for showdowns with major powers like China or Russia. But lately, this high-tech stealth jet has found itself in a very different kind of fight, against drug cartels. In mid-September 2025, Marine F-35Bs from Fighter Attack Squadron 225 touched down in Puerto Rico. Their arrival kicked off a U.S. military campaign in the Caribbean aimed at crushing drug smuggling routes that feed America's drug crisis. Backing them are roughly 1,900 sailors aboard the USS Iwo Jima and its support ships, along with over 2,000 Marines from the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit. The F-35 Lightning II which has already been deployed in other regions. Whether the U.S. would ever make that same move in Mexico, however, remains uncertain. Still, the sight of an F-35 or an aircraft carrier in the fight against drug cartels has sparked debate. Why use a $100 million stealth jet to chase smugglers in speedboats? And would it be generally effective in the war against these masterminds? The cartels may be ruthless, but they don't exactly have radar systems or fighter aircraft. Critics call it overkill, a luxury tool used for a low-tech mission. A Pentagon official, however, insists it's all part of a wider homeland defense plan. The department has a range of capabilities to defend against threats, like narco-terrorists, and Secretary Hegseth deploys the forces needed to meet the president's security goals. In other words, when the White House calls for results, the Pentagon sends its best. But not everyone is convinced. Richard Abulafia, a veteran aerospace analyst, believes the F-35 isn't the right fit for this kind of job. He explained that the F-35 shines when there's real danger from enemy air defenses or hostile jets. Otherwise, it's just expensive flying hardware. His point makes sense. These jets were built to take on advanced threats, not smugglers with outboard motors. So why would anyone even consider using such a weapon against drug traffickers? Some argue it's about showing force or testing new tech in unconventional missions, but many within defense circles think it's wasteful. The F-35 is designed to go head-to-head with enemy nations, not chase pickup trucks through jungles or coastal routes. Each flight hour costs tens of thousands of dollars. Maintenance is complex, and the plane's systems are tuned for war zones filled with surface-to-air missiles, not low-level smuggling routes. Using an F-35 for anti-cartel missions would be like sending a Formula One car to deliver mail. Impressive, but completely impractical. There's also the issue of risk. Every time an F-35 takes off, the Pentagon watches closely. Losing one would be a major blow, not just in cost, but in classified technology. Its stealth coding, targeting systems, and onboard computers are all top secret. No one wants those falling into the wrong hands because of a mission that never needed it. Instead, many believe the U.S. should rely on aircraft better suited for that kind of fight, like drones, surveillance planes, and older attack jets that can patrol for longer without burning through millions. These tools fit the mission's scale, leaving the F-35 where it belongs, preparing for the kind of battles only it can win. So when talk arises about using the F-35 in the cartel war, the question isn't whether it could, it's whether it should. Because when a plane built for the world's toughest wars gets dragged into small conflicts, it's not just the jet that's being misused. It's the very idea of what air superiority is meant to stand for. That dilemma mirrors Mexico's own long struggle, powerful tools and the same haunting outcome. No matter how the strategy shifts, the battlefield keeps evolving, and the cartels keep adapting. Mexico's war against the cartels has stretched across 4 presidencies, each promising a new way to end the bloodshed. Yet from soldiers in the streets to softer, hugs not bullets policies, the results have been painfully similar. New gangs, more violence, and a nation still trapped in conflict. When Felipe Calderon took office in 2006, he launched what became known as Mexico's War on Drugs. Almost overnight, soldiers filled the streets. Tens of thousands of troops were sent to fight cartels and take down corrupt police forces. Backed by U.S. intelligence and funding, Calderon's forces hunted down major drug lords, killing or capturing 25 of the country's 37 top cartel bosses. To many, it looked like a bold step toward victory. But the strategy came at a heavy cost. When the big bosses fell, their lieutenants turned on each other. The once powerful cartels split into dozens of smaller, more violent factions, each fighting for control. Mexico's murder rate skyrocketed. Over 120,000 homicides were recorded during Calderon's 6-year rule, nearly twice the number under his predecessor. Critics said the military wasn't trained for police work, and communities caught in the crossfire paid the highest price. In 2012, Enrique Peña Nieto took power with a promise to change direction. He said his goal was to protect civilians and businesses rather than chase down cartel leaders. Still, he couldn't break Mexico's reliance on the military. His government formed a new paramilitary-style national police force, hoping it would fill the gap between soldiers and local police. At first, things looked better. Violence dipped slightly in his early years. But by 2015, the bloodshed returned. Cartel rivalries deepened as the old kingpin strategies fallout continued. By the end of Peña Nieto's term, Mexico hit its highest homicide rate in modern history. Fragmented gangs and territorial wars turned entire regions into battlegrounds. Then came Andrés Manuel López Obrador, better known as AMLO, in 2018. He rejected the all-out military approach, saying Mexico needed hugs, not bullets. His plan was to fight the root causes of crime by improving education, creating jobs, and reducing poverty. He also pledged to tackle corruption, seize cartel money, and ease tensions with communities trapped in cartel zones. But in practice, AMLO's government still leaned on the military. He created a new security force, the National Guard, led by soldiers. Critics said this blurred the line between police and army once again. While AMLO's rhetoric was softer, cartel violence stayed high, and many Mexicans saw little change in their daily lives. Reports linking his circle to cartel money further eroded trust, and U.S.-Mexico relations grew strained. Families of the disappeared, victims lost to the drug war, accused him of protecting the same forces they blamed for the violence. By 2024, Claudia Sheinbaum stepped in as Mexico's first female president, inheriting the same war that had outlasted every leader before her. She promised to continue AMLO's hugs not bullets vision, but add sharper intelligence and investigative work to track organized crime. Her administration quickly scored a symbolic victory, the largest fentanyl seizure in Mexican history. But the violence didn't stop. Killings and territorial disputes still plague much of the country. Sheinbaum has urged the United States to step up cooperation and share more intelligence to combat the flow of weapons and synthetic drugs. Yet many observers fear Mexico may be caught in a cycle that new presidents can't easily escape. Old tactics dressed in new language. From Calderon's full-scale war to Sheinbaum's softer tone, every strategy has tried to strike at the cartel's heart. But each one, whether through force or reform, has faced the same reality. The cartels adapt faster than the government. Their power is woven into the country's economy, politics, and communities. 2 decades on, Mexico's drug war remains a story without an ending. But just as Mexico struggles to find its footing, new pressure is building north of the border. In Washington, powerful voices are calling for a tougher approach, one that doesn't just cross diplomatic lines but threatens to redraw them entirely. From the moment Donald Trump stepped back into power, talk began swirling among his inner circle about taking military action against Mexico's drug cartels. To them, the problem of fentanyl and cross-border crime called for a show of force. But behind the tough talk lies a dangerous gamble, one that could turn a fight against crime into a full-blown disaster for both nations. For years, Trump has been known for pushing limits in foreign policy. His second term has only amplified that pattern. He distanced the U.S. from longtime allies, questioned NATO's strength, and rattled global trade with new tariff battles against Canada and Europe. Now Mexico seems to be the next target on his list, not as a trading partner or neighbor, but as a potential battleground. Some of Trump's closest allies have openly suggested sending U.S. troops into Mexico to crush the cartels, especially after certain groups were labeled as foreign terrorist organizations. That classification would make military action legally possible, but at a steep diplomatic cost. For Mexico, such an act would be nothing short of an invasion. For the U.S., it would mean crossing a line that could reshape America's image in the entire region. The question in Washington has quietly shifted from, will it happen, to what would it look like if it did? Would it be a targeted strike, a long-term deployment, or something even bigger? With Trump's unpredictable style, all options seem open. Yet history offers a clear warning. When America takes its wars abroad, the results are rarely clean, quick, or controllable. Look back at Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Each started with confident promises and ended with mounting losses and political chaos. Mexico would be no different. In fact, it might be worse. The U.S. tried something similar before. In 1916, General John Pershing led a mission into northern Mexico to capture the revolutionary fighter Pancho Villa after his raid on New Mexico. The mission failed miserably. Villa slipped away, and instead of weakening him, the invasion turned him into a national hero. Mexicans united behind him, viewing him as a symbol of resistance against American aggression. A modern-day invasion would almost certainly have the same effect. Instead of dividing the cartels, it could unite them, along with millions of Mexican citizens, under a common cause, defending their homeland. President Claudia Sheinbaum's government, which already leans heavily on messages of national pride, would use the crisis to rally support and strengthen its position. Anti-American sentiment would surge, making future cooperation nearly impossible. Diplomatically, the fallout would be devastating. Latin America has long viewed U.S. interventions with suspicion, and a military strike on Mexico would confirm those fears. It would push neighboring countries further from Washington's influence and closer to global rivals like China and Russia, who are eager to expand their footprint in the region. America's credibility as a partner would crumble. Even the fight against the cartels would suffer. Current joint operations between U.S. and Mexican agencies depend on intelligence sharing and coordination. A military move would destroy that trust overnight. Without Mexico's cooperation, America would lose vital access to cartel networks, safe house intel, and cross-border smuggling routes. The very thing the U.S. wanted to stop, the flow of drugs and violence, could actually grow worse. A cartel base was erased without a single boot crossing the border. In an astonishing Navy operation, the United States obliterated a big cartel base in seconds. The mission was completed with such precision that it felt like a classified counter-terror operation rather than a drug enforcement operation, and that was the point. America is no longer just playing around, fighting cartels. They are hunting them down with the same tools that were once reserved for terrorist targets. So how did this operation work? And is this the initiation of a new kind of war that is silent, across borders, and with no avenue for escape? Join us as we break down what's happening behind the headlines, which may change global crime forever. The deadliest wars aren't always fought with missiles and tanks. For years, drug cartels have been deploying a fleet of crewed submarines to transport narcotics. They call them the narcotic submarines, or narco subs, and send them to sea from their jungle workshops in Colombia and Peru. The dimension of a narco sub can be between 30 and 50 feet and is still shockingly primitive with no GPS, radio, or weapons, but at the same time is very functional in its simplicity. Its only mission is to deliver millions of dollars in drug payloads through the open ocean and then disappear into the blue sea and never return. These improvised submarines are built for under $1 million and transport cocaine or heroin worth about $30 million. No one knows if the crew members are involved. However, if law enforcement discovers these vessels, the operators would flip a switch to sink the vessel, destroying all evidence and cutting off the mission. Naval forces regularly participate in a game of high-stakes underwater hide-and-seek, searching the seas for the almost non-existent footprints of narco subs lurking just below the surface. But last May, that game took a giant shift. Law enforcement intercepted and seized 4 ghost vessels in just 21 days. One submarine was stopped just before it could enter international waters while under law enforcement detection and was seized by the United States. Another was caught skimming just 7 feet below the surface, so low it fell below radar detection, a near-perfect blind spot. The confrontation became a clash between technological superiority and the cartel's enormous smuggling audacity. Due to the severity of the situation, the United States Navy employed strategic precision rather than overwhelming force. Convection cutters like the Cutter James and elite helicopters with the squadron teams are usually stationed offshore in total darkness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They are very efficient in carrying out naval missions because they recognize that if any submarine successfully evades capture, millions of dollars in narcotics would be flooding into American streets. The Navy understands it cannot carry out the mission alone, so it partners with neighboring countries. The Orion campaign is an unprecedented coalition of 62 countries sharing real-time, satellite, drone intelligence, surveillance, and coordinated information. Each partner maximally leverages its capabilities. In Colombia, for instance, Special Operations Forces will conduct operations in the jungle in search of clandestine submarine building operations. Ecuador can track foreign distributions of lithium batteries, key submarine components that move through the river ecosystem. In the Atlantic, the Netherlands supports naval teams with sophisticated underwater drones that can systematically scan the seafloor and identify uniquely shaped formations that could indicate a submarine den. This collaboration neutralized more than 130 high-value targets between November 24 and February 25. That's more than 60 narco submarines expected to carry an estimated street value of $2.5 billion worth of drugs. Notably, the unwillingness of the coalition forces to take physical possession of drugs represents a significant psychological victory. The Orion campaign does not chase after boats. It tracks patterns, movements, and errant behaviors that even the most meticulous traffickers struggle to hide. Since its inception, and with the capture of the 60th narco submarine, one thing is obvious. In this type of war, victory does not belong to whoever moves first, but to whoever knows how to wait. The waiting comes to fruition with one of the operation's quiet powerhouses, United States Coast Guard Cutter James. A little over 390 feet in length, this boat does not wield huge missiles, nor does it have a radar system. Instead, its weapon is more difficult to counter: patience, discipline, and focus. Between 2024 and 2025, the USS Cutter James spent a little more than 100 days at sea and performed more than 20 precision operations without launching a single missile. But the effect of those operations devastated the cartel's supply lines. Then on February 14th, the crew noticed something odd: a thin water trail that didn't fit any shipping patterns. The vessel wasn't broadcasting identification signals or taking any reputable course. Instead of swooping in, the James followed the target from a distance and let it drift east toward suspected delivery zones. At the right time, the team deployed a small drone to overwrite its source, and the picture became clear. It was a narco sub painted for camouflage, with only the tip of its tail appearing above water. In just minutes, a tactical helicopter flew off the back of the USS Cutter James. It did not pursue the crew or attempt to sink the vessel. It fired non-lethal rounds at the engine of the submarine, disabling it and forcing it to surface. There was not enough time for the smugglers to escape or destroy what was on the boat, an estimated cargo of nearly 140 million United States dollars. This is just one operation of what the Cutter James is capable of. Sometimes the boat remains covert, dropping underwater sonar nets to trap unsuspecting submarines. Sometimes it trails a commercial vessel that appears harmless until drug containers are discovered. And often the USS Cutter James does not make the arrest in person. It does so quietly by sending out coordinates to partner nations such as Ecuador or Costa Rica and letting them intercept and take action. On April 2025, a spokesperson from the United States Department of Homeland Security revealed something important. They said the Cutter James isn't judged by how many missions it completes, but by how many drug runs it stops before they reach the mainland. By their estimate, the James has blocked nearly $500 million worth of illegal shipments without firing a shot. To the cartels, this ship is not a regular patrol boat. It's a ghost. They never know where it is or when it might strike. Every time a smuggling route is shut down, every time a sub is captured intact, another piece of a billion-dollar drug empire is broken apart. And that's why nothing scares the enemy more than the ship they never see coming. A nation's navy has always represented its standing in the world. Only a few empires owned the waters during the Age of Exploration, as the British Empire did for centuries. Yet this completely changed after the Second World War, and the United States emerged with the most significant maritime force in the world. Today, the Navy represents more than warships and missiles. It reflects America's core values: freedom, independence, and resilience. Even in the 18th century, as a new nation finding its place, the United States understood that controlling the seas meant protecting its future. One of the most evident signs of that strength today is the unmatched fleet of American aircraft carriers, often called floating cities. The United States Navy has 11 of the world's largest and most advanced aircraft carriers, more than its neighboring countries combined, and can project its power globally. American naval dominance began in 1922 with the launch of the USS Langley, the Navy's first aircraft carrier. The fleet has evolved through decades of innovation and advances in engineering. The fleet's backbone is the Nimitz and Gerald R. Ford classes. The Nimitz class was introduced in the 1970s when it became synonymous with American might and global security. As these ships are at the end of their life cycle, the Gerald R. Ford class will not only act as their replacement, but will redefine an aircraft carrier's capabilities. To put that into perspective, imagine a vast, floating city that travels the globe while carrying dozens of fighter jets, helicopters, and thousands of personnel, all ready to respond to a crisis anywhere in the world at a moment's notice. That is an American aircraft carrier. Most countries may possess one or two smaller carriers to conduct limited operations. If there's trouble on the other side of the planet, the U.S. does not need to wait for permission to use someone else's land. It simply dispatches a carrier. The Gerald R. Ford measures more than 1,000 feet in length and weighs about 100,000 tons, making it the largest aircraft carrier ever made by the United States. Its redesigned flight deck allows for a 25% increase in takeoffs and aircraft landings daily compared to the Nimitz class, with the added ability to take advantage of a smaller island control tower, which was reduced by 20%. The Gerald R. Ford maximizes usable deck space for daily operations. The carrier has an improved dual-band radar system combining SPY-3 and SPY-4 technology. This powerful radar system can track more than 200 targets simultaneously, including maritime fighter jets, weapons-equipped cruise missiles, and even hypersonic threats, with complete capability in poor weather. With these many advances, the Ford is not only an air-launching platform for operation, but a floating command and control center for a modern and demanding battlefield. The Gerald R. Ford is meant for detection, defense, speed, and endurance. It has over 10 advanced weapon elevators that lift almost 24,000 pounds of ammunition at 150 feet per minute. It would have taken hours to get the same result, but now it can be accomplished in 10 minutes. The integrated power system generates 600 megawatts of power, 3 times greater than a Nimitz class. Enough electrical capacity for its weapon systems, both current and future capability. The smart distribution can keep things operational after damage to critical systems. Most importantly, the Gerald R. Ford can provide continuous operations for up to 25 years, provided the nuclear refuel is replaced, allowing for fewer supply missions and operational costs and more endurance during long deployments. To the United States Navy, these carriers are more than warships. They are a floating laboratory to test and improve future technologies. Components such as electric armor to deflect incoming projectiles, weapons, and even high-energy combat lasers have been developed. They are now included as actual systems on board the Gerald R. Ford class carriers and have been tested positively. However, besides the advancements on deck, the Navy has more power, which is evident below the sea. A nuclear propulsion system propels the Gerald R. Ford. It has 3 massive propellers, each about 20 feet wide and the size of a small swimming pool. These propellers allow the ship to travel over 30 knots faster than most cargo ships on the ocean. That propulsion system allows the Ford to have airspeed capabilities to carry dozens of fighter jets with tons of weapons and plenty of fuel to strike for an entire week, while reaching anywhere in the world in about 5 to 7 days. In simple terms, the Gerald R. Ford is an operationally complete mobile airport. It can circle half the world in under a week and begin air operations the moment it arrives. With more than 3 million gallons of fuel on board, it does not need to be refueled, nor does it need to consider the availability of bases near the area of operations. That capability adds a level of risk, practically and psychologically, to any adversary. Its presence can boost morale and engagement on a battlefield, helping the United States allies gain a practical advantage in warfare. The United States Navy has over 50 multi-purpose attack submarines, 14 strategic missile submarines, and 4 guided missile submarines. Each type of submarine has a particular function that adds to security at sea. Attack submarines of the Los Angeles, Seawolf, and Virginia classes are like silent assassins and underwater snipers because of their unique ability to not be seen. They travel fast and are heavily armed. They are armed with Mark 48 torpedoes and Tomahawk cruise missiles that can target ships and land targets. The latest versions of Virginia-class submarines, especially the block upgrades, Block 3 and Block 4, can carry approximately 40 Tomahawk missiles, making every Virginia-class submarine a mobile center of power, able to deal with a devastating strike. To understand how powerful that is, think of a Virginia-class submarine like a city bus, but instead of passengers, it's packed with long-range Tomahawk missiles, each capable of hitting a target with extreme accuracy from hundreds of miles away. Now imagine that bus moving silently beneath the ocean, completely undetectable, and ready to launch a devastating strike without warning. With around 40 of these missiles on board, a single Virginia-class submarine has enough firepower to hit multiple enemy bases, airfields, or ships, all from deep underwater and without ever being seen. Then there is the Ohio class, the bedrock of America's nuclear deterrence. The intimidating vessels are over 560 feet long and weigh up to 20,000 tons. Originally designed to carry 24 nuclear Trident missiles, the Ohio class now only carries 20 missiles due to international agreements. However, the Ohio class still contains nearly half of the country's active strategic nuclear warheads. To put this into perspective, imagine a quiet, invisible train deep underwater, with each car having a weapon with enough destructive power to wipe an entire city off the face of the earth. Adversaries wouldn't sense it was coming. This is the threat of the Ohio class. 4 of the 18 submarines were modified to carry guided missiles instead of nuclear weapons, and therefore can strike with great precision and without detection. Ideal for smaller, swift-moving threats, without initiating a larger conflict. From the year 2000 to the year 2007, the United States Navy significantly transformed its submarine fleet. The Navy converted 4 Ohio-class submarines, built only as nuclear deterrent forces, to guided missile submarines. Each conversion cost about $1 billion, but brought substantive capability. These vessels can now employ up to 66 Navy SEALs and specialized underwater craft like the SEAL delivery vehicle. The enhancements effectively transformed the Ohio class from a single-role nuclear platform to a multi-mission weapon that can strike precision targets and hyper-enable deep-sea covert operations anywhere on the globe. Each Ohio-class submarine can carry up to 20 Trident 2D5 ballistic missiles. While these missiles do not have designated targets when the submarines are launched, they can receive real-time mission updates at sea. This capability is made possible through secure ultra-low frequency communications provided by the United States Strategic Command in Nebraska. In addition to nuclear capability, the Ohio-class submarines have 22 vertical launch tubes that can launch up to 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Prime example of the capabilities of the Ohio-class submarine was shown in 2011 with Operation Odyssey Dawn. As part of a joint effort with British and French forces, the USS Florida, SSGN 728, launched 93 Tomahawk missiles to take out Libya's air defenses under Muammar Gaddafi. The overall operation created a successful no-fly zone and significantly diminished the regime's ability to respond. The mission clearly showed these converted submarines are not only nuclear deterrents, but also tactical assets that could influence the course of a conflict before it ever turned into a full war. The United States Navy is preparing for a future of attack submarines that could be called SSNX-class submarines. The SSNX class will replace the Underwater Virginia and Seawolf classes by the year 2040. The SSNX program aims to boost stealth, dramatically improve underwater sensors, and increase weapons capabilities. The SSNX submarines would perform various missions with flexible utility, including intelligence collection, special operations, and anti-submarine warfare, all of which would support more missions at a lower cost for the Navy. Each SNX submarine will likely cost $5.6 billion to $7.2 billion, with a price tag vastly more than a Gerald R. Ford-class aircraft carrier at approximately $13 billion. The new SSNX-class submarines mark a considerable step forward in the United States Navy's effort to maintain its edge against growing global threats, particularly the advanced Russian and Chinese undersea threats represented by the Yassin class and Type 095 submarines. Each contends with some combination of speed, silence, and lethality, all valued attributes of an adversarial submarine. However, the SSNX submarines are wired to outperform those challenges. Some of the critical upgrades include a water jet propulsion system that eliminates traditional propellers. The system is quieter while still able to achieve speeds over 35 knots. With AI engaged with the sonar and weapon systems, the SSNX will be able to process, react, and engage with highly accurate lethality, all in the high-pressure environment of undersea combat. What sets the United States Navy apart from any other Navy? It boils down to one thing: consistently investing in new technology and weapon systems. Rather than relying on size alone, the Navy has invested in innovation. From undersea surveillance to missile accuracy, almost every facet of its operations has been modernized to address today's threats. The Navy is designed to be fast and accurate. It is capable of a global reach, whether hunting a sneaky submarine or conducting a precision airstrike hundreds of miles away. The United States has been fighting cartels for decades, but something has pushed this war into dangerous new territory. A weapon once thought too destructive for regular use is now on the table: the vacuum bomb. Known for sucking oxygen out of the air and crushing everything in its path, this weapon could change the entire fight along the border. But how did America get here? And why are officials suddenly willing to use a weapon so terrifying it was once compared to weapons of mass destruction? Join us as we uncover the secret missions, deadly technology, and decisions that could redefine this brutal conflict forever. The United States has been secretly fighting drug cartels near the southern border for many years, but things have now taken a more serious turn. A new weapon is being used that most people have never heard of before. It is called a vacuum bomb, and it is designed to cause massive damage, especially to drug labs hidden underground. This bomb is known for creating a powerful blast that spreads through enclosed spaces. It can reach places that regular weapons cannot, making it useful for destroying secret cartel locations. Behind closed doors, top American soldiers have been working with Mexican troops they trust to catch cartel bosses. These secret operations do not make it into the news, and sometimes even Mexican government officials don't know they're taking place. When important cartel leaders suddenly go missing, the American government keeps quiet about it and lets Mexico get the credit for the success. But the cartels have started to figure out what's really happening. They've begun offering large cash rewards for information about suspected American agents operating in their territory. Things changed when the new president resumed office. Just 2 weeks after becoming president, they officially called 8 big cartels terrorist groups. Now American soldiers, especially the Navy, can go after these criminals much harder using laws made for fighting terrorists. The United States is gearing up for what could be its most intense operation since the early days of the War on Terror. According to 6 officials from military, law enforcement, and intelligence circles, drone strikes are now being seriously looked at as a way to hit drug cartels hard. The targets would include cartel bosses, their vehicles, drug-making sites, and storage hubs. Talks are underway at the highest levels, involving the White House, the Department of Defense, and top intelligence leaders. Back in 2020, former Defense Secretary Mark Esper shared that President Trump had once asked about firing missiles at drug labs in Mexico. That claim was later denied, and now with drone technology more advanced and pressure mounting to deal with cartel violence, the possibility of launching targeted attacks is closer than ever. Another report suggests the United States government plans to use B-2 bombers carrying vacuum bombs to completely destroy cartel hideouts in drug-making facilities. Vacuum bombs, also called thermobaric or fuel air, explosives are among the most powerful weapons used in modern warfare. What makes them so deadly is their unique design. They use oxygen from the air around them instead of carrying their own supply like regular bombs. When a vacuum bomb explodes, it first releases a cloud of explosive material that mixes with the air. Then, either automatically or with a second charge, this cloud ignites and creates extremely high temperatures along with a crushing pressure wave that can kill anyone nearby. These weapons come in different sizes, from small grenades that soldiers can throw by hand to massive devices like the father of all bombs, which has the explosive power of 44 tons of TNT. These deadly weapons have a long history that goes back more than 100 years. During World War I, German soldiers made the first versions called Brandgranate. These were special bombs filled with materials that burned slowly, like fabric soaked in tar and gunpowder dust. When they exploded, they made huge flames that lasted about 2 minutes and threw burning pieces everywhere. German scientists kept working on this idea during World War II. An Austrian scientist named Mario Zipper helped lead this work, but they never managed to make it work perfectly. The big breakthrough happened during the Vietnam War when America made the first bomb of this type that actually worked. In 1971, American forces built the CBU-55 as a test weapon and shipped it to Southeast Asia to see how it performed. The Air Force Weapons Center at Eglin Air Force Base handled these tests, using slower planes like the A-37 Dragonfly and the A-1 Skyraider to figure out how effective these new bombs were. This was the start of a new chapter in military weapons that could eventually be used against drug cartels working near America's southern border. The CBU-55 saw combat just once during the entire Vietnam War. Major General Homer D. Smith, who commanded all American forces in Vietnam at the time, gave approval for this single mission. A C-130 transport aircraft carried the weapon up to 20,000 feet before releasing it over the target area. The blast was enormous. It spread across roughly 4 acres, and military analysts later calculated that about 250 enemy soldiers perished in the explosion. Most were not unalive from burns, though. They suffocated when the blast consumed all the oxygen in the area. This happened near the very end of the conflict, and South Vietnam officially surrendered on April 30th, 1975. Once the Vietnam War ended, the military did not abandon this technology. Instead, they developed better versions like the CBU-72 fuel-air explosive, which became a regular part of America's arsenal. These improved weapons later saw action during Operation Desert Storm in Iraq. Not everyone was comfortable with these developments. In 1980, 3 countries, Mexico, Switzerland, and Sweden, brought a proposal to the United Nations asking for a complete ban on thermobaric weapons. Their effort failed when other nations pushed back against the idea. After what happened in Vietnam, the world began to wake up to just how dangerous these weapons really were. The United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research tried to group thermobaric weapons with other enhanced blast weapons to better control them. After this, several countries made fresh attempts to create international rules about these devastating bombs, knowing full well how much destruction they could cause. But these efforts hit a wall because different nations had conflicting interests and couldn't agree on how to handle such powerful weapons. During the search for Osama bin Laden, American troops ran into a major challenge. Fighters were hiding in deep cave systems that regular weapons couldn't reach. To deal with this, a new bomb was developed, the BLU-118B thermobaric bomb. It was made to break through thick rock and destroy underground hideouts that were built to resist attacks. This bomb worked differently from standard explosives. It could reach into tight, protected spaces and cause damage where other weapons failed. As the bomb's effects became clear, debates started about whether it was right to use something so destructive. The weapon's ability to wipe out everything in enclosed areas made some experts worry about the long-term impact and whether it crossed ethical lines in combat. The Middle East turned into a testing zone for this weapon as conflicts grew worse in the area. American commanders chose to use the BLU-118B against al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters hiding in Afghanistan's deep cave networks. The caves gave enemy fighters almost perfect cover from attack. Regular bombs and weapons couldn't reach them effectively, so traditional military tactics were not working well. March 2, 2002 was a significant moment in military history during a secret mission near Afghanistan. An F-15E Strike Eagle from the 335th Fighter Squadron flew this historic operation. The aircraft carried the first BLU-118B thermobaric bomb ever used in actual combat. The plane's computer system used laser targeting to figure out exactly where to drop the weapon. It calculated the aircraft's height, speed, and distance from the target to get the timing right. The bomb was supposed to hit the entrance of an underground tunnel system located near what appeared to be a regular house. After the weapon was released, its fins and guidance system worked to keep it on the right path. The bomb followed the laser targeting beam as it fell toward the ground. However, the mission didn't go as planned. The Pentagon has kept most of the details secret, but they did confirm that something went wrong. The bomb detonated too early, exploding above ground rather than reaching its intended target deep underground. This malfunction meant the weapon didn't achieve its primary objective of penetrating and destroying the tunnel complex. International law around vacuum bombs creates confusion for many people. No specific rules prevent countries from using thermobaric weapons, fuel-air explosives, or vacuum bombs against enemy military forces during war. The United Nations Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons does set some limits, mainly focused on protecting civilians. The agreement's protocol on incendiary weapons states that these powerful bombs cannot target civilian populations, civilian buildings, or basic infrastructure like hospitals and schools. Over the years, several countries have tried to create tougher international rules governing these weapons. All of these efforts have failed. As of November 2022, no broad international agreements exist to control or limit how nations can use vacuum bombs in warfare. But America isn't waiting to deploy vacuum bombs before taking action against the cartels. The United States has already launched aggressive operations that are seriously damaging cartel networks across multiple countries. These coordinated efforts involve multiple nations working together, sharing intelligence, and using their combined military and law enforcement resources to hit the cartels where it hurts most. Operation Martillo started in January 2012 and became one of the best examples of international cooperation against drug trafficking. 14 countries joined this massive effort. The United States, United Kingdom, France, Spain, Guatemala, and Honduras all participated, with Colombia taking the lead role. Their mission was simple but ambitious: shut down cartel drug shipments traveling by sea. The operation used warships, aircraft, and special teams to block the main water routes between South America and the United States. The strategy made it extremely difficult for cartels to operate. Every major shipping lane suddenly had multiple countries watching and patrolling the waters. Cartel boats couldn't move freely anymore because they faced constant surveillance and the risk of being intercepted by international forces working together. The numbers tell the whole story about how well this international teamwork actually worked. In just the first year, Operation Martillo hit the cartels hard enough to shake up their entire operation. Law enforcement caught 339 smugglers and took control of 101 boats loaded with drugs. The operation also grabbed $21 million in cartel money and $16 million worth of smuggling equipment. This included boats, communication gear, and other tools the cartels used to move drugs. But catching drug smugglers at sea was only the start of a much larger effort. Operation Orion grew into one of the biggest international missions ever put together. 62 countries joined forces, from tiny island nations to major world powers. Working together as one team, they accomplished something that would have been impossible for any single country. The combined effort seized over 225 tons of cocaine and more than 1,000 tons of marijuana. The total value of all drugs captured reached over $8.3 billion. These drugs never made it to the streets. Without this operation, they would have spread across the globe, ruining lives and destroying communities in dozens of countries. These cartels had grown way beyond regular crime gangs. They worked more like big companies with secret labs, underground tunnels, speedboats, and submarines. To stop them, law enforcement needed the same level of tools and teamwork from all over the world. The American Navy used special radar that was so sensitive it could spot tiny boat trails from satellites up in space. The Dutch brought robotic submarines that could swim under ships and look for hidden spaces where drugs might be stored. Colombian soldiers walked through thick forests, searching for secret spots where cartels launched their boats. Even countries that don't have any ocean coastline helped out in big ways. They followed the cartel's money trails and broke into their secret messages. This worldwide effort worked because each country brought something different to the table. Every nation used their best skills and equipment, creating a team that was much stronger than any single country fighting alone. The cartels tried using super-fast boats called go-fast boats to escape from law enforcement, but America found a way to stop them. The Coast Guard built a special team called HITRON, short for Helicopter Interdiction Tactical Squadron. This elite group flies speedy MH-65D Dolphin helicopters loaded with sniper rifles and machine guns. When HITRON sees a suspicious boat speeding across the water, they fly down low and tell the boat to stop using loudspeakers. If the smugglers don't listen, expert marksmen use big .50 caliber rifles to shoot the boat's engines. They do this very carefully so they can stop the boat without hurting anyone on board. The smugglers started fighting back in clever ways. They made their fast boats look like regular fishing boats so they wouldn't stand out. They also built secret hiding spots under the boat decks where they could stash drugs. These disguises didn't work against a special task force called the Joint Interagency Task Force South. This command center puts together the best people from the FBI, Navy, Coast Guard, Customs, and CIA all in one place. Information moves instantly between all these agencies to track suspicious boats across huge areas of ocean. JIATF South watches drug boats from the second they leave South America until they reach American waters. When something looks suspicious, they can quickly send planes and ships to catch the smugglers before they get away. These successful operations have scared the cartels so much that they now pay a lot for secret information about what America's doing, and in response, the JIATF keeps changing how they work to stay one step ahead of these dangerous criminal groups. The cartels have lost more than $500 million in recent operations. These losses hit them hard and caught them completely off guard. But the Navy's fight against drug smuggling was just beginning, and one particular ship was about to make history in the war against cartels. Since the start of the year, the Coast Guard cutter James has become what cartels fear most. This ship is 418 feet long and has a crew of 150 highly trained people. The ship completed a 112-day mission that was so successful, cartel bosses won't even talk about it anymore. In just 4 months, the cutter James grabbed more than 48,000 pounds of drugs. That's enough narcotics to supply a medium-sized American city for a whole year. The street value of all those seized drugs came to $519 million. The cutter James ship deployed a long-range drone that could patrol for 18 hours without landing. The drone's advanced cameras were so sharp they could make out ship names from miles away. After tracking a suspect boat near Ecuador, boarding crews moved in and arrested 3 smugglers while recovering over 2,200 pounds of cocaine. The following day delivered an even bigger victory. A surveillance aircraft detected 3 speedboats moving in formation, something cartels rarely do unless they're transporting massive drug loads. Helicopter teams from the cutter James managed to intercept all 3 boats simultaneously, leading to 9 arrests and the seizure of nearly 14,000 pounds of cocaine. The following month, these smugglers attempted a new strategy. They deployed a stealth-style vessel built to avoid radar systems. However, the cutter James helicopter crews reacted swiftly, using targeted gunfire to disable the boat's propulsion system. The crew was captured unharmed, and authorities confiscated an additional 8,240 pounds of cocaine. The wildest incident happened on January 18th, when panicked smugglers started dumping their cocaine into the water to escape getting caught. The cutter James crew refused to let them get away with it. They sent out high-speed chase boats to hunt down the running suspects, while other crew members rushed to pull about 6,000 pounds of floating drugs out of the water before they disappeared underwater. Other Navy ships joined these efforts across different areas. The USS Minneapolis-St. Paul and USS St. Louis carried out their own operations in the Caribbean, grabbing massive amounts of cocaine and hitting major cartels hard. The Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels took especially heavy losses from these raids. The information collected during these busts turned out to be just as important as the drugs themselves. Crews learned about smuggling paths, identified key cartel members, and discovered new ways traffickers move their products. Military planners now use all this data to predict where future drug shipments will go and stop them before they reach their destinations. The Pentagon recently moved the USS Gravely to the Gulf Coast near the Texas-Mexico border. This Navy destroyer carries dozens of Tomahawk cruise missiles and will help Border Patrol and Coast Guard operations in the area. The real game changer will come when B-2 stealth bombers join the fight against cartels. These aircraft are some of the most advanced military technology ever created. They can fly into enemy territory without being detected, drop their weapons, and escape before anyone knows what happened. Each B-2 has 4 powerful engines that produce 17,300 pounds of thrust. This lets the bomber fly faster than 600 miles per hour at heights that most missile systems can't reach. Cartels have nothing that could even come close to threatening these aircraft. Once these bombers start operating against cartel targets, the balance of power will shift completely. The cartels will face a level of military force they've never experienced before, and there's nothing they can do to defend against it. Thanks for watching. While you are still here, click on the link on your screen to check out another of our videos. See you there.